Hey everybody. So earlier today, I got an interesting comment from somebody who's self-professed narcissist or cluster B or otherwise disordered. It was a fairly lengthy comment, and okay, making a video. He's always up in my business. Anyways, so I got this pretty lengthy comment about somebody who was starting to, from their perspective, wanting to do better. They said that they had some narcissistic traits and tendencies, but didn't know whether or not they fit into the actual disorder spectrum. They could definitely see issues with them with splitting and dichotomies and a number of other things. Cat. This is why you're fat. He's demanding food. Anyways, so I wanted to do this video a little bit just to sort of provide some perspective, because not everybody that comes to a channel like this is somebody who's an abuse survivor. Some of us are on the disordered side ourselves. Now, here's an important distinction. Okay, if you're curious about whether or not you're a narcissist, or maybe you believe you're a narcissist, or you have narcissistic tendencies, and you're wanting to know more about it, chances are good you do not have NPD. Chances are good you do not have narcissistic personality disorder. That's different from being narcissistic or being a narcissist. The disorder itself is a pretty severe thing. And as with all things internet, a lot of people who are just simply narcissistic or simply a narcissist get armchair diagnosed as having the personality disorder. And I always tell people, you have to look at parallels. Look at something like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, where Howie Mandel is a perfect example. Him and Mark Summers. They're both two television personalities, both with OCD. They're OCD neat and tidy and germophobia, right? OCD consumes their life. It's a full-on consuming, right? Now, if you live with somebody who's got OCD, chances are good you're going to pick up some habits, like always making sure everything is neat and tidy. You do these things, these accommodating things, to accommodate somebody in your life that has these tendencies, right? Well, after you've lived with somebody like that for quite some time, if if things go some other way and you move out and you're no longer living together, you're going to take a lot of those traits with you. Things like making sure there's plenty of bathroom soap, making sure the floor is squeaky clean, going to great detail to clean the house. Begging from one side is the same as begging from another. You pick up all of these tendencies, right? That does not make you OCD. It just means that you lived with somebody with OCD, and now you have the crumbs, as they're called. You have the crumbs of having been around somebody with a disorder. Now, if you're curious as to whether or not you're a narcissist, by definition, by having that sort of introspection, almost always eliminates the possibility of you having the disorder. Not always, but for the most part, somebody with NPD, the disorder itself is so severe, so consuming, that there's no way that it could ever be their fault, right? Which is sort of mind-blowing. But if you think about OCD as being a personality disorder, and just the sheer obsession that they have with washing hands and cleanliness, the sheer obsession with themselves and their image, and making life all about themselves, is to an insane degree, right? So NPD, I think, is largely overdiagnosed by the internet at large. You can be a narcissist. You can even be a high-functioning narcissist, which is somebody who gets along great in society. There are plenty of high-functioning narcissists that are good people, like doctors, for example, attorneys. Those two professions have high incident rates of narcissism. Normally I would just cut the video and start over, but this is just way too hilarious not to share. Go knock something off of a counter. Okay. So there's that. Now, there are certain crumbs that you can pick up from being around people who are cluster B disordered. And you can even have the disorder. And there's something called cluster B not otherwise specified, or not specified otherwise. One of those. And what that is if you have the traits, you have traits of a cluster B disorder, but they're not centralized into one specific disorder. You might have 1 or 2 from histrionic, you might have 3 from narcissistic disorders, you might have a couple from borderline, you might have a few of the antisocial, right? They're just kind of sort of, you just have disorder sprinkles from the cluster B just all over you, right? That's not otherwise specified. It means you have enough traits to be considered to have a disorder. They're just not all neatly organized into one specific disorder. That is entirely possible, right? And then it's also just possible that you have a few of the traits that you need to work on, but you're not classified as a disorder. And I think by and large, most people that we label as borderline and narcissism, most people fall into that area of almost but not quite. We wish that, a lot of times we wish that we could just put the label on people because that's easy, and that's a cluster B characteristic of just wanting to split and just be done with it, like poof, you're a horrible person. But it's usually, the reality is the majority of people that we consider NPD or BPD, just from armchair diagnosis, the chances are good they're probably not at the clinical level. It doesn't mean that they're not. I'm sure you can meet plenty of people who are at the clinical level. I'm just saying the casually diagnosed people in your life probably do not have the disorder. They probably just have the crumbs, or they have a couple of bad things to work on. Now, if you're one of these individuals trying to work on your crumbs, one of the biggest challenges, I think, is around the area of splitting, which splitting is the yes, the no, the right, the wrong, the good, the bad, the friend, the foe. It's the tendency to cut to the chase. So whenever you hear something and you're trying to analyze something, most everything is a shade of gray, right? A lot of times, because of the history that comes with a cluster B disorder, you're used to things leading up to explosive conclusions, right? That's one of the hallmark characteristics of being around cluster B people. Things build up into explosive conclusions. And so it becomes a game of trying to predict, is this something that's going to explode in my face? And if you see the slightest possibility, you'll be like, all right, well, I know exactly where that's going to go, and I'm just not going to entertain that, right? And so it becomes a constant ascertaining of, is this going to explode? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, well, we're going this way. And that leads to splitting. It leads to extreme dichotomies. And after a while, it's one of these things where somebody, a social mistake, people get to the point of just dropping friendships before it ever gets to that level, right? Like, yeah, we got along great for a while, but then I started to notice some of their bullshit, and I know exactly where it was going, and I would just rather not. Some people even pride themselves on the ability of being able to sever ties and sever friendships. I think it was some people that say I've become shockingly good at breaking up with people and friends. That's one of the hallmark characteristics, and it's a very difficult one to get over because the counteraction to that is to say, well, it could blow up in my face, but we'll write it out, we'll see. One of the things that gets lost is when you identify something that could explode in your face, you just sever it and get rid of it, right? Instead of, this could blow up in my face, we need to go ahead and address that possibility, communicate, come to a resolution, and prevent the explosion before it ever happens so that we can continue our friendship. That is, I think, one of the biggest deficits that comes around with being around cluster B people. That whole process of preventing an explosion before it happens just eventually just goes out the window. And when you deal with cluster B people, it goes out the window because typically it just doesn't matter anyways, because you'll work things through with somebody who's got a cluster B disorder. You'll think you will have worked through it, and then it explodes anyways. And you're like, I thought we discussed this, right? And that's one of the hallmarks. It's like, I thought we were beyond this. I thought we were past this. I thought we had talked about this. We agreed to do blah, 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 right? We agreed to this, and now you're still blowing up, right? And when you're around enough people like that, you just start to, feel like, well, this is just pointless, right? But it isn't pointless. See, the thing is you're just around too many cluster Bs. If all you're surrounded with are time bombs, then everything else that comes around also looks like a time bomb, right? So you spend enough time surrounded by people who are ticking time bombs, you just, for your safety's sake, you just start assuming that everybody around you is a time bomb. Even if they're not a time bomb, great. Well, then, there's never going to be any explosions, right? So it's always, the mindset of it's better to assume somebody could be a time bomb than to let myself believe that they could never be a time bomb and then have it blow up in my face, right? And a lot of people get the genesis of splitting in there. And that pattern ultimately leads to breakups, and you start to see the same pattern over and over and over again, where you have a wonderful relationship, everything's great, high levels of kittens and glitter and unicorns, and then after a while this person starts to have some complaints about you that seem to define your life over and over. It's like you always have to win, you just always have to be right, you just always have to have everything so perfect, or it's like, of course, because we all know you got to be right. You start hearing things like this. Then you start hearing things like, you're so unstable, I swear you're bipolar. You start hearing these things from people, and what makes it tough is that you hear it from person after person after person after person after person. So you start dating different kinds of people, different types of people, and the relationships all start failing for the same reasons over and over and over. And it's different kinds of people, but they're all breaking up with you for the same reasons, right? Now that is a tough pill to swallow. That's where sort of the BPD gets its roots, is you just, man, you just feel like you just can't have nice things, and you just can't have nice people, because when you have them, they just leave. So I just can't have them, so why bother? I'm just destined to grow up to being a crazy old cat lady, or a crazy old man, a hermit, like from Up, squirrel. Well, no, that's the dog. But anyways, people with on the borderline side tend to just feel that way. Narcissism comes about as a way to avoid those pains, right? So you work on yourself, and you work on yourself, and you work on yourself, and you say, okay, nobody's ever going to break up with me for these reasons ever again. You know what? I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to make some progress. I'm going to make something of myself. I'm going to go out into the world, make a difference. I've got to become this really good person. I've got to tackle this head on, and I'm going to do all the work. I'm going to put in the man hours. I'm going to do the R&D, and become a really good person so that I no longer have these problems, right? And so you do. But the thing is the more you work on yourself, those traits do not go away, right? You think they do, but they don't. They go into your shadow psychology. They go into your shadow self. So they're still there. All the personality, you haven't changed as a person. You've changed your methodology to life. You've changed your approach to life. You've changed many things about yourself. You've changed your education. You've changed your conversation style. But you are still fundamentally the same person. Except now you've convinced yourself that you're no longer that other person that was unworthy of love, right? You know, you have grown. You've made something of yourself. That's not me anymore. That's the old me. The new me is not like that, right? And therein comes the mask. And because of that, because you no longer believe you are the old you, you're the new you, and the new you does this and the new you does that, then, well, you start to see similar side effects, and you start seeing people, put things back on you. And what it is it's a projection of yourself. See, you're saying, I know, bless you. Please don't eat the plant. If I don't feed this cat, he's gonna just, why are you eating my plant? Anyways, when you're a narcissist, and this is what I'm getting to, people with the narcissistic personality disorder don't believe anything is wrong because that was the old them, and now they are the new them, and the new them is nothing like the old them, right? So like a good example is like a kid who grew up overweight, was picked on and bullied for being overweight, and says, you know what, being overweight is a problem. People don't like overweight people. So I'm going to work out. I'm going to get ripped. I'm going to get buff. I'm going to have a hard body. I'm going to have this super chiseled physique. I'm going to be a model. And then that way I will be so far from being fat that, nobody could ever call me fat, and nobody could ever hate me for that, right? Well, if that's you, the old you is fat, the new you is ripped and chiseled. The second somebody cracks a joke, like saying, like, okay, you could have like the best body in the world, right? Be like, yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger, that guy's fat, right? There's somebody who's ripped and chiseled like that. If they actually heard something like that and they have that kind of history, they'd be like, I'm not fat. You're the one that's fat. Like they have like this meltdown, right? And it's because of that painful past that they've built this persona around to protect themselves, right? So, anyways, if you're one of these people and you want to work on your crumbs, there's a really good, easy way to get started. And that is go to any bookseller, any bookstore, like Books A Million or Barnes & Noble. Go to the psychology section or the mental health section. There is always what's known as disorder workbooks. They have these workbooks that are DBT and CBT workbooks for all the most common disorders, right? So you can get a BPD workbook. You can get a NPD workbook. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't imagine they sell too many of those. But they have workbooks for CPTSD, PTSD, ADHD, MOUSE, all of those, the E's, D's, and whatevers. Go to the bookstore and buy these workbooks. They're wonderful. I've gone through a CPTSD workbook myself to help me get over a tragic loss. They're good daily readings. They provide, the splitting pathology, how it's just either all bad or all good. These books teach you all the things that fall in the middle of the splitting pathology. And so I would say if you're dealing with narc crumbs or things like whole object relations, object constancy, splitting, and all of those cluster B flavored things, learning all the possibilities in the middle, in between the split, I think is fundamentally one of the best things you can do for yourself. Get off the table, cat. Go. Get on. Anyways, I must obey my master now. Apparently, he's not going to let me continue filming, and this is long enough. I hope this helps. So, do please like, comment, or share. I've got a group on Facebook, Narcissistectomy. It's spelled just like the channel. Come join the discussion there. I'd love to have you. We are a small group and growing quite slowly, but that's cool because I know each and every one of you. So, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.